This is a travel power strip. It's designed to let you plug into a European outlet and then have 3 US style outlets. And it also comes with 4 USB ports. There's 2 USB-A and 2 USB-C, and it says 65 watt power delivery fast charging. So I was sent this to review for free. If you wanted to purchase it, the MSRP is $50, but I've seen it listed for $30 online. They haven't paid me for my review, and my opinion remains my own. So in the box we have a small instruction and manual sheet and the device itself. It has a little Velcro tie on a 3-foot cord. It plugs into kind of a European style socket here, and this block can either have the cord come off the bottom so you could put it on a desk, or it can just come off the edge. It kind of has a rotating socket here that it can rotate around. There are 3 grounded US standard outlets. This does not do voltage conversion, so anything you plug into these outlets must be universal voltage compatible. It must be able to accept 220 volts AC because it's plugged into 220 volts AC. And then on the end here it has a little USB power bank charger. Now the manual lists multiple different configurations. So if you have one thing plugged into USB-C, you can get 65 watts out. If you have one thing plugged into USB-A, you can get 18 watts out. Now when you start mixing and matching, there's a whole bunch of different combinations, but basically you're going to be able to do things like 45 watts and 20 watts if you use both USB-Cs. You can do 15 watts together if you're using both A ports. And if you combine a USB-C and an A, there's some combination of power you can get out there. So you might be able to do 30 watts and 20 watts and 15 watts, for example. So your max is 65 watts. So according to the instructions, the best way to get power out of this guy is to use a single USB-C port. It looks like if you plug into both USB-A ports, it's limited to 15 watts total. Whereas if you plug into one USB-A port, it can do the quick charge standard, and if your device supports a 9 or 12 volt charging rate, it can draw up to 18 watts. Alright, so they don't list an amp for the power, the AC power, but they do say maximum of 3,250 watts. And if you divide that by 220 volts, that's basically a 14.5 or 15 amp adapter. So it looks like this guy is rated to 14, 15 amps of power through all 3 of these outlets here. Alright, when you plug it into power, this pretty bright blue light lights up to say, hey, I've gotten power. That's kind of useful because a lot of European outlets are switched, so you know, hey, I need to flip that switch the other way to get the thing to light up. It's not nice if you're trying to sleep in a dark room with this guy, so be aware there's a pretty bright blue light on the top of it. Alright. We're testing a single USB-C outlet here. Supposedly this will give 65 watts. So it's negotiated 20 volts. The amp draw is ramping up. So it's doing 3.18 amps. And so from a power perspective, that is very close to the 65 watt rated maximum. It's 64 watts, say. So I'm going to give it that, yes, it can do 65 watts out of a single USB-C port. Now supposedly, if we plug in something to the second USB-C port, it can do 45 watts out of the top one and 20 watts out of the bottom one. And I want to see if it can do different voltages out of the 2 ports. Alright, it's renegotiating. We're able to do 20 volts out of C1 and 9 volts out of C2. The amperage here is only up to about 2.2, so the power is definitely very close to 45 watts. It's actually just slightly above, so we're able to get 45 watts out of C1, and I'm getting only 12 watts out of that, but that's limited by what my phone needs to draw. So I suspect I could probably get a full 20 out of the C2 port there. Alright, we are currently doing 65 watts out of the USB C1 port. I'm going to plug in another current load to the C2 port, and it's going to renegotiate things. Alright, so the laptop is drawing 12 volts at 1.5 amps, so it's basically doing a 12 volt at almost 20 watts. It's 18.9, so it's just about 19 watts there. And this load over here is still at 20 volts, and it is doing 45, so just slightly over 45 watts. So it is able to do 45 watts on that guy at 20 volts, and 19 watts at this guy on 12 volts. So it can successfully do dual voltages and split the power on the two USB-C ports. Alright, I've plugged in a third meter to the USB-A port, and it's providing 5 volts, but we're not drawing any power yet. So let's plug my phone into that guy. Okay, so now it is drawing some power. The USB-C ports are starting to renegotiate. Okay, so USB-C 1 is doing 30 watts. USB-C 2 is still doing 19 watts. So the phone's at 5 volts. It's only drawing 1.3 amps, so it's probably drawing, less than 10 watts, something in the, 8 watt range. And that might just be because my phone doesn't need a lot of charging. So it is able to do 30 and 20. So you have your 50 watts on USB-C, and then the other 15 watts are for the USB-A ports. And I'll point out we're doing 3 different voltages here. We have 20 volts on this guy, 12 volts on this guy, and 5 volts. Alright, unplug the laptop. We have 45 watts going out of the USB-C one, and then the USB-A port has done quick charge voltage negotiation up to 9 volts. So if you only have one port on the USB-C side of things, the USB-A ports can do quick charge compatible charging where they'll step up their voltage a bit to get a faster charging rate. Alright, so for charging, 2 USB-C devices works very well. It'll generally do 30 and 20 watts out of the two. If you want to use the quick charge ability of the USB-A ports, you'll need to have only one USB-C port plugged in, and then you can plug into the USB-A port. And if that's the situation, it can get up to the 18 watts, and it will be able to negotiate to the 9 or maybe even the 12 volt level. I've never seen it at the 12 volt level, but it definitely negotiated up to the 9 volt level for the quick charge ports. So my recommendation here is either use the 2 power delivery ports or use 1 power delivery port and 1 USB-A port to get the quick charge ability. Now if you have a couple of low current devices, you plug them both into these guys, you'll get 5 volts. It'll share basically 3 amps amongst the 2 devices. For slower power devices like the little earbuds or headphones or something that doesn't need a lot of current, these guys will charge them up fine. Alright, so the USB charging block that's part of this power adapter works exactly as it's specified, does a good job charging things up. Now this guy here does not convert voltage, so you can plug in any US appliances that'll fit that plug, but if they do not support 220 volts you will fry them. So it's up to you to make sure you're only plugging in things that can handle the 220 volts. And a lot of charging power blocks will. You just have to look at the input specification, make sure it says 100 to 230 volts, and so it's compatible with European voltage levels. Alright, so if you ever anticipate having to plug in more than one US device to a European plug, the little 3-foot extension cord and power strip dealie here is nice. This USB power delivery and quick charge power adapter is pretty darn nice just on its own right. I mean, that's a pretty quality USB charger there, and you have the addition of these daisy chains here. So here's a travel tip. Say you're at a hotel, it has a lamp plugged into the wall. The lamp has a plug like this. You replace the lamp plug with this guy. You want the lamp to still work. The lamp won't plug into this, but if you buy one of these super inexpensive US to European adapters, plug the lamp in there, now your lamp works, you can plug in your US things, and you get the USB ports.